The Zodiac killer seemed completely unstoppable. But when it comes to facing Dexter Morgan, it's not even close. Today, we're breaking down exactly why this battle is so one-sided. From combat skills, to kill methods, to pure intelligence. And trust me, by the end, you'll be surprised who has the upper hand. Most people think of Dexter as just another TV serial killer, but he's actually a trained assassin who specifically hunts other killers. See, Dexter Morgan isn't your typical psychopath. This guy was literally molded from childhood to be the perfect killing machine. After watching his mother get murdered with a chainsaw when he was just 3 years old, he got adopted by a Miami Metro cop named Harry Morgan. And Harry wasn't just any cop. He was a detective who recognized what Dexter was becoming and decided to channel it. Harry created what's known as the Code, which is basically a set of rules that turn Dexter's homicidal urges into vigilante justice. Rule 1, don't get caught. Rule 2, never hurt an innocent. Rule 3, make sure your target deserves it. This wasn't some random deranged serial killer development. This was systematic training. But here's what makes him terrifying. Dexter didn't just learn to kill. He learned to kill smart. He attended medical school and was at the top of his class before switching to forensics, which gave him expert knowledge of human anatomy and crime scene analysis. He became a forensic blood spatter analyst for the Miami Metro Homicide Department, meaning he literally studied murder methods all day, then honed and perfected his own techniques. His physical training is insane too. We're talking about a guy who's proficient in jiu-jitsu, knows pressure points, and has years of close quarters combat experience. In the show, he regularly goes up against ex-military, other serial killers, and trained fighters. Dexter's also about 5'11" and in great shape. He runs, lifts weights, swims. In his prime, he wasn't some out-of-shape couch potato. This guy can carry adult bodies, snap necks with his bare hands, and has the stamina to chase targets through multiple city blocks. And that's just the beginning of his advantages. His methods are what really set him apart. Dexter doesn't just randomly kill people. He stalks them for weeks, sometimes months. He learns their routines, their weaknesses, their fears. He has access to police databases, criminal records, and forensic equipment. When he's ready to make his move, he uses M99 tranquilizer to subdue targets without a fight. Then comes the ritual. Dexter wraps entire rooms in plastic, straps his victims to tables, and takes his time. He's got over 150 confirmed kills, and almost all of them were other killers. We're talking about murderers, rapists, child predators, people who knew how to hurt others. And Dexter systematically eliminated each of them. And he isn't some random psychopath. This is a serious predator who was literally trained from childhood to be the perfect killer. So he had years of experience taking down other murderers who were way more dangerous than the killers we are used to hearing about. But what if he had to go up against the infamous Zodiac killer? Now you might be thinking, okay, but the Zodiac was never caught, so he must be pretty skilled too, right? Well, let's talk about that. The Zodiac killer built his reputation on mystery and mind games, not actual combat ability. Look, I get why people think the Zodiac was some kind of criminal mastermind. The guy terrorized Northern California for years, sent cryptic letters to newspapers, created unsolvable ciphers, and taunted police while never getting caught. On the surface, that sounds pretty impressive. But when you actually break down what he did versus how he did it, a very different picture emerges. The Zodiac's confirmed kills were David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen at Lake Herman Road. Shot them while they were sitting in a car. Darlene Farron at Blue Rock Springs killed in an ambush attack on people in a parked car, though Michael Mageau survived. Cecilia Shepard at Lake Berryessa. He tied her and Brian Hartnell up first, then stabbed them while they were helpless, though Hartnell survived. Paul Stein in San Francisco shot a taxi driver in the back of the head. When you look at his actual methods, every single one of these attacks followed the same pattern. Find isolated victims, use the element of surprise, strike from a distance or when targets are restrained, then disappear quickly. At Lake Berryessa, he wore a hood with a symbol on it and approached the couple while they were having a picnic. He told them he was an escaped convict who needed their car and money. Then he tied them up with clothesline before pulling out a knife. These weren't combat situations, they were executions. The taxi driver killing is probably the most telling. Paul Stine was just doing his job, driving the Zodiac to a destination in San Francisco. The killer shot him point blank in the back of the head, took his wallet and a piece of his shirt, then walked away. There was no struggle, no fight, no resistance to overcome. This reveals something crucial about his real capabilities. The Zodiac succeeded because he carefully chose targets who couldn't fight back. Young couples on dates, a working taxi driver, college students. These weren't hardened criminals or trained fighters. They were regular people living their lives. Even his physical description doesn't scream dangerous combatant. Witnesses described him as heavyset, around 5'8" to 6 foot, weighing between 195 and 200 pounds. He had a stocky build, not exactly the profile of someone built for physical confrontation. His weapons varied, but tell a story about his methods. He used a .22 caliber pistol at Lake Herman Road, but switched to a 9mm for later attacks. The knife at Lake Berryessa was only used after victims were tied up. These weapons were chosen for effectiveness against defenseless people, not for combat situations. The famous ciphers and letters that made him legendary, those came after the murders. He'd mail them to newspapers days or weeks later, always from a safe distance. The psychological warfare was noteworthy, sure, but it happened when he was nowhere near any danger. He was obviously a coward. Being mysterious doesn't equal being dangerous, especially in a fight. Zodiac succeeded because he picked easy targets and disappeared quickly. There's zero evidence he could handle himself against someone who fights back, let alone a trained killer. Which brings us to the most important question. Before you watch any further, I'm happy to finally announce that I'm releasing the first limited drop of my t-shirts. At the start, there are only 100 available, so make sure you buy them while you can at dtmerch.store. Enjoy the video. What happens when an ambush predator meets someone who's literally designed to hunt predators? That's where this gets interesting. In a direct confrontation, Dexter has every possible advantage over the Zodiac. Let me break down exactly why that is. First, think about their pure physical capability. Dexter regularly overpowered people who were supposedly tougher than him, like Dokes, a guy who was a Special Forces veteran, trained in hand-to-hand combat, knew how to wield weapons, and had advanced survival tactics. He was paranoid, aggressive, and constantly suspicious of Dexter. In their first real fight, Dexter not only held his own, but actually won. And this was while Dexter was able to maintain his cover as a mild-mannered lab geek to everyone else around him. Later in the series, when Dokes figured out Dexter's secret, they had an underwater fight that should have been impossible for Dexter to win. Dokes was in his element, a trained soldier in a life-or-death situation. But Dexter adapted, used his environment, and came out on top, even, getting a minor gunshot wound to the leg. Then there's the Trinity Killer situation. Arthur Mitchell was a serial killer who'd been operating for over 30 years. He was methodical, just as paranoid as Dokes, and extremely dangerous. When Dexter finally confronted him, it wasn't even close. Dexter outmaneuvered him, captured him, and eliminated him without breaking a sweat. Dexter also has documented feats of pure strength that would be impossible for most people. He regularly carries adult bodies. Dead weight is incredibly difficult to move, but Dexter makes it look easy. He snapped necks with his bare hands, crushed windpipes, and overpowered multiple attackers at once. His jiu-jitsu training isn't just for show either. We've seen him use pressure points to disarm people holding guns. He can disable someone's grip, redirect their momentum, and turn their own weapons against them. This isn't movie magic. These are real martial arts techniques that require years of practice to master. But it gets even worse for Zodiac when you consider what else Dexter has up his sleeve. Dexter's combat experience isn't limited to regular people. He's going up against other killers who were actively trying to murder him. The ice truck killer was his own brother, someone who knew Dexter's methods and weaknesses intimately. The Doomsday Killer started a religious cult with multiple members. The brain surgeon was a neurosurgeon with detailed knowledge of human anatomy and psychology, and a sickeningly detached disposition when it came to taking a human life. Each of these confrontations required Dexter to adapt his tactics, overcome unexpected challenges, and outthink opponents who were specifically targeting him. That's completely different from the Zodiac's experience of attacking unprepared civilians. Zodiac? Heavy-set guy with no combat training who relied entirely on surprise attacks. His only documented physical feat is overpowering college students and taxi drivers, people who weren't expecting violence and had no training to deal with it. When the Zodiac attacked Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard at Lake Berryessa, he had to tie them up before he felt safe enough to use his knife. Think about that. He was so unsure of his ability to control two unarmed college students that he restrained them first. That's not the behavior of someone confident in their combat skills. Even his choice of weapons reveals his limitations. Whether using a .22 caliber or 9mm pistol, he preferred distance weapons that didn't require close contact. And again, the knife attacks were only attempted after victims were already restrained or incapacitated. Dexter literally specializes in taking down killers. His entire method involves studying his targets, learning their patterns, and then systematically dismantling them or using them to his own advantage. Zodiac's psychological games and ciphers mean nothing when you're face to face with someone stronger, faster, and more experienced. And that's not even considering the factor of intelligence. You're probably wondering, but what about Zodiac's famous ability to evade capture? Here's why that actually works against him. Zodiac's evasion tactics were designed for avoiding police, not surviving against another killer. There is a very important difference. The Zodiac's intelligence was all about misdirection and confusion. He'd send letters with deliberate misspellings to throw off handwriting analysis. He created ciphers that took decades to solve. He called police stations to confess, then disappeared before they could trace the calls. He even sent a piece of Paul Stein's shirt to prove he was the real killer. All of this was brilliant for someone going up against 1960s law enforcement. Police departments didn't communicate well with each other at the time. Forensic science was primitive compared to today. DNA analysis didn't even exist yet. Computer databases were nothing more than science fiction at the time. But Dexter operates in the modern era with tools the Zodiac never had to deal with. Dexter has access to forensic equipment that can analyze trace evidence the Zodiac wouldn't even know he was leaving behind. Modern fingerprint databases, DNA sequencing, fiber analysis, digital communications tracking. All of this would be available to someone with Dexter's law enforcement connections. Plus, he's caught killers who are way more elusive than Zodiac. The Trinity Killer operated for decades across multiple states, changing his method with each kill in his cycle. The Ice Truck Killer knew exactly how police investigations worked and still couldn't stay ahead of Dexter. The Brain Surgeon was literally closely related to someone inside law enforcement and had access to case files and evidence. Dexter still tracked him down. Remember, Dexter isn't just smart. He's smart in exactly the right ways. His forensic expertise means he understands evidence collection and crime scene analysis better than most actual cops. His experience with other killers gives him insights into criminal psychology that would be impossible to fake. This creates a massive problem for Zodiac because all of Zodiac's advantages were environmental, not personal. He succeeded because during his reign of terror, law enforcement was disorganized and under-equipped. He disappeared because communication between police departments was terrible, and forensic science was incredibly limited. Strip away those advantages, and what do you have? An out-of-shape coward who only attacks unarmed civilians from ambush positions when he knows he has the upper hand. His psychological manipulation tactics would never work on someone who's immune to personal intimidation. And Dexter has stared down killers who are far more frightening than the Zodiac. The complex codes and mind games that made Zodiac famous would actually work against him here. All that communication creates evidence. All those letters create patterns. All those phone calls create opportunities for tracking. Dexter's method is the opposite. He studies targets quietly, using official resources and police databases. He learns their routines without revealing himself. He strikes once, efficiently, and then makes the problem disappear completely. No letters, no games, no taunting, no evidence, just systematic elimination. And his surprise attack methods are useless against someone who's always prepared. Dexter carries tranquilizer, knows self-defense, and has the situational awareness that comes from years of hunting dangerous people. He's not going to be caught off guard by someone approaching his car or knocking on his door. Even people who thought they had Dexter cornered ended up losing to him. Lila West, the Skinner, Stan Liddy, even Sergeant Dokes. They all had him right where they wanted him at one point or another and still couldn't outmaneuver Dexter Morgan. Which leads us to the brutal truth. You might be thinking this seems totally unfair at this point, and honestly, you're absolutely right. This matchup is so one-sided, it's basically unfair to the Zodiac. Think about it this way. We're comparing a fictional character who was specifically designed to be the perfect killer against a real person whose main advantage was operating in a time when catching killers was much harder than it is today. Fan communities have been debating this matchup for years, and the conclusion is always the same: Reddit threads, versus battles, wiki discussions, Comic Vine forums. They all reach the same verdict. Dexter wins 9 times out of 10, and the 10th time is only if something goes catastrophically wrong. The reasons are always the same. Superior combat training on Dexter's part, obviously. Better physical conditioning for him as well. More advanced tools and more stealth with his weapons of choice. Harrison was right, he is a lot like the lab geek version of Batman. Add in all of the access to modern investigative techniques and his experience fighting other killers instead of attacking civilians, and the answer is clear as day. One Reddit user put it perfectly. Dexter would kill him, dice him up, and be back to normal life before anyone knew the Zodiac was missing. Even when people try to argue for the Zodiac, their arguments fall apart under scrutiny. He never got caught. Neither did Dexter for most of his career, and he was operating under much more intense scrutiny. He's unpredictable. Unpredictable to 1960s cops, not to someone who profiles killers for a living. He's patient. So is Dexter, and he's also trained, more motivated, and almost always armed with M99 tranquilizer. The Zodiac has literally no advantages except his real-world status, which doesn't help in a hypothetical fight. Let's run through a realistic scenario. Say the Zodiac tries his usual approach. He identifies Dexter as a target and plans an ambush attack. Maybe he follows Dexter to an isolated location and tries to approach with a weapon. First problem: Dexter's situational awareness. This is a guy who's been hunted by other killers, stalked by suspicious cops, and targeted by revenge-seeking criminals and ex-lovers. He notices when he's being followed. He recognizes threatening behavior. He's not going to be caught off guard like a random couple on a date. Second problem: Dexter's always ready. He carries tranquilizer, knows how to improvise weapons, and has medical knowledge that makes him dangerous even with everyday objects. He'd even break his own bones before he'd let himself die at the hands of another killer. The Zodiac's advantage of surprise disappears when your target is ready for violence and doesn't fear pain. Third problem: if it comes to a physical confrontation, it's over immediately. Dexter has several pounds of muscle to his advantage, years of combat training, and experience fighting people who actually know how to fight. The Zodiac has what exactly? Experience shooting tied up college students and other unsuspecting people. The bottom line is, you're comparing a character designed to be the perfect killer against a real person who only succeeded by picking soft, easy targets. It's like putting a trained Navy SEAL against someone who's only ever mugged elderly people. The skills just don't translate. Dexter was created by writers who wanted to make the most efficient, dangerous, and intelligent killer possible. Every aspect of his character, his training, his methods, his physical abilities, his psychological profile, was designed to make him unbeatable. The Zodiac was a real person with real limitations. He succeeded through careful target selection, environmental advantages, and luck. Take away those flimsy factors and he's just another criminal who'd be way out of his league if he took on Dexter. So here's the final verdict. This isn't even a contest. Dexter wins in every possible scenario: hand-to-hand combat, weapons fight, psychological warfare, investigation and tracking, even raw intelligence. The Zodiac's only chance would be to avoid the confrontation entirely. And even then, Dexter could be tracking him without the Zodiac killer ever even realizing it until he was belly up on a kill table. When it comes to facing off with Dexter Morgan, anonymity may be the Zodiac's only saving grace. Drop a comment with who you think Dexter should face next, and hit subscribe for more blood spatter battles.